I've been playing CD Projekt Red's highly anticipated title, Cyberpunk 2077, continuously for a month now. Having completed it multiple times and running through the multiple endings and side quests, I've had some time to analyse and dissect this fascinating world that has been created by CD Projekt Red. I've truly loved what Night City has had to offer thus far. When going into this game, I expected a very far-fetched, ungrounded experience. Not that all games have to be realistic. After all, gaming, at least for me, is meant to be an escape from the cycle that is real life. But when hopping into Night City, I sensed an overwhelming feeling of being in a grounded setting that for me shared some similarities with how we're living now, and how we may well be living in the future. So, this got me thinking, could Cyberpunk 2077 actually be a glimpse into our own future? Let's discuss. Just a fair warning before we start, this video may contain spoilers for the main narrative. Now this analysis may come across as completely impossible, but hear me out and let's try to break down some of the ways of life in Night City compared to our lives here in 2021 and see how we're already following Night City's ways and how we may end up as the game proceeds. And just as a side note also, the main narrative of the game is definitely something we wouldn't come across. Let's hope so anyway. Now here's something to ease us in gently. The first thing you spot when playing Cyberpunk for the first time is the Cyberware, in which obviously plays a big role in the game as well as Night City's way of life. It's everywhere, from aesthetic modification to cyber limbs to optics, to weapons and self-defense systems. Are some of the cyberware modifications far-fetched for the real world? Perhaps, but some do seem quite feasible. Body modification is nothing new, it's been around for decades, from people having chest implants, to lip injections, to people having their noses modified to a shape they prefer. People sometimes having perfectly good teeth removed and replaced by sparkly white implants, and so on. So if and when tech body modifications become available, especially on the private market, of course people are going to jump on it. Cyberware, or a form of it, is nothing new though, at least according to my research. Yes, it does exist, but mostly in the medical field. Pacemakers have been around for a long time, a tiny piece of tech that is implanted to help people with hearts that don't function properly. If I'm getting any of this wrong, I do apologise. I'm no medical expert. I'm just a nerd that writes about video games occasionally. Even more recently, less than a month ago, at the time of making this video, a man with corneal degeneration has had his sight restored by a completely synthetic cornea that apparently was cyberpunk inspired. Almost every resident in Night City, at the least, has cyber optics with a fully fledged operating system, with a jacking in point and a shard port and/or system. This is another system I can easily see being introduced into our realm. Almost every piece of tech we use, especially handheld, requires USB, from charging to data transfer, and almost everything we use to store things portably on our handheld devices and such are stored on flash drives or SD cards, and I'm almost certain implants will be developed where you'll have a USB-C port and an SD card slot in your head, probably behind your ear like in the game, so you can charge devices with the USB port and insert SD cards to play back photos and videos and to look at documents through your cyber optics like in the game. Even artificial limbs are becoming more advanced than ever, becoming even more useful to amputees, and I do believe in time this tech, again, will end up on the private markets and will become so advanced and will be full of so many options of gimmicky tech that people will willingly give up a perfectly functioning limb for a cyber one. Would it be a questionable decision? I would have thought so. I know what you're also thinking. How will this cyberware receive power to operate? I thought about this too. I've come to the conclusion that the main processor that would run the operating system and provide all the power and data to the cyberware would be powered by the brain's own electrolytes, by presumably connecting to the brainstem. If I were to make an educated guess, I could see a lot of this tech coming out of Japan or China. I'm leaning more towards China on this one. There is a city in southern China which borders Hong Kong, Shenzhen. It's the electronics capital of the world currently. Foxconn is based there, responsible for building the world's latest Xboxes and PlayStations. Apple's manufacturing is also stationed there. There's this one big tech market based in the centre. It's often referred to as China's tech Silicon Valley. And I also easily could see it being the hotspot for the world's cyberware. I just hope people don't get too carried away and end up looking like Royce or Adam Smasher. Maybe I'm just reading into this too much, but in recent weeks I've been looking into how our world is right now, and I'm seeing so many parallels from our world to Cyberpunk's. I've discussed with co-workers and they've been wondering the same. They too drew up similarities and expressed that how well grounded the game is, and that to me makes it seem even more plausible. Look how we are now with our smartphones, always in our hands, wireless earbuds hanging out of our ears, and smartwatches strapped to our arms, tracking our every move and literal heartbeat. Am I making more sense to you yet, or do I just need to get out more? The vehicles in Cyberpunk 2077 I found to be rather interesting, and CDPR's approach to them. Obviously I'm going to have to start with the cars firstly, as my first playthrough was with the Nomad life path. When starting the life path with your car in the garage, I was surprised to see an engine under the bonnet. This left me a little confused, as at least here, in Western Europe, there is an ongoing push to get electric vehicles onto our roads. So to find a modern car with an engine in a world set 56 years in the future surprised me. But then again, car brands in North America don't really pay attention to higher authorities, forcing them into a market there is no demand or infrastructure for, and I admire them for that. But as usual, I thought outside the box. I've been paying attention to the whole electric versus fossil fuel war for years now. Many years ago I saw reports that Honda were working on an engine that could possibly run off of H2O. Yes, that's water, my friends. And I'm assuming not just regular tap water either, probably deionised. In recent years though, these reports seem to go quiet. The more recent advancement is the use of hydrogen. There have been many tests conducted. Toyota ran a modified Prius from John O'Groats, Scotland to Land's End, Cornwall on one tank of fuel. To my viewers that might not be aware, that is the entire length of the UK, corner to corner, spanning 837 miles or 1,347 kilometres, which is an incredible range. Hydrogen also emits no emissions and can run with a combustion engine, providing they can be adapted to run it. I believe also the substance can be man-made. So it is apparently clear that the cars in Cyberpunk have found some other substitute for fossil fuels. It isn't clear what fuel is being used, but my guess it would be hydrogen. And again, I feel this could end up being implemented into our society. The whole being forced into electric cars has been a very controversial subject, at least here in the UK. As I'm currently writing this, in 2030 the UK government will ban the sale of any new petrol and diesel as well as hybrid cars. And the general public are assuming we will be taxed out of running older petrol and diesel cars after this period. The problem is we've got hardly any infrastructure put into place, charging stations for example, and there is still hardly any information on service and maintenance costs, driving and starting the vehicle in cold conditions, and as it stands, the distances on full charge are still way off from what a modern diesel and petrol cars can achieve. There is also the issue of charge time and the onboard battery's lifespan in the long run. Of course this will improve over time, but 2030 isn't too far away, and the average lifespan of a car model is at least 6 years, and mid-term facelifts don't tend to change the model that drastically. I think if possible, people will opt for a hydrogen conversion on their cars to keep their older cars on the road. I also believe governments will backtrack on the EV ideology and allow new hydrogen cars to be sold alongside EVs, perhaps even hybrid variants. So again, this is another element in Cyberpunk I could see ending up in our society. And when it comes to the tech in the cars, Cyberpunk has seemed to do the opposite, arcing back to the 1980s with multiple buttons and non-colour screens. I think car manufacturers will persist on tech getting more and more advanced and distracting the driver more than ever, with Mercedes-Benz recently creating a dashboard that is literally one giant screen. It is quite impressive, I must admit. And as for the rubber the cars of Night City are rolling on, I think this is a little out of date too. As of the last few years, some tyre brands have been showing off and developing airless tyres, in which obviously are puncture-proof. I can easily see these coming out in the next few years and becoming the norm. So with time and tweaking, I can easily see this as our preferred choice of tyre moving forward. So moving on from the cars of Night City, I quickly want to discuss the APVs used in the game. I feel like something similar to them could be developed in the future. VTOL tech has been around for a long time and easily could be applied to this sort of vehicle. The first form of VTOL was created with the Harrier jump jet that allowed the jet to obviously take off and land vertically and hover around similar to a helicopter. The aircraft was released in 1967, so yes, I could easily see commercial and private APVs in our skies in the future. Now it's time to talk about the corporations in Night City. It would appear the tech corporations have somewhat taken control of Night City, from corps such as Arasaka providing security and cyberware for the city. Their main rival, Militech, are no better. And of course the flip side to that is there has been a large amount of distrust between the public of Night City and the corporations. And again, from analysing these corporations and their actions on the city is something I could easily see happening in our society. Now, of course, I could never see a real-world corporation designing a soul killer program that stores people's souls in the cloud and donates bodies to them for eternal life. I really hope not anyway. However, I can easily see corporations taking over our city's way of life. It is certainly happening right now. Let's start with our favourite comfort package company, Amazon. A disclaimer though, I do love Amazon. They have a fantastic delivery service and infrastructure, but they are definitely trying to worm their way into multiple different business ventures. From TV streaming services, gaming, autonomous deliveries via drones, and self-driving vans, and to smart speakers in our homes, supposedly monitoring our conversations. And also, they've turned their hand to building mega campuses. Of course, tech companies such as Samsung and Apple are leading the way with our ever-growing obsession and dependence of mobile devices, but I will talk about them later. And of course, I can't avoid talking about our own real-life Tony Stark, Mr. Elon Musk, the chairman of Tesla and SpaceX. These two companies are pushing to revolutionise how we live. Although I don't agree with all of it, some of Elon's ideas are interesting. But out of some of the corporations I've mentioned, I can easily see one of these two becoming the Arasaka of the world. Tesla are doing crazy things with their cars, self-driving for example.
If I pull this lever here twice, I get a bong to tell me I've engaged the autopilot, which means I'm not driving. It is. All of this means that I can drive along writing important messages on my sketch pad. Because I know that if the car in front slows down, I'll slow down. If it speeds up, I'll speed up. If the traffic stops, I'll stop.
Outer space isn't really mentioned much in Cyberpunk, but in one of the many endings, you do end up on an Arasaka spacecraft, with other space structures within the Earth's orbit. SpaceX plans to send people on private space trips, including to Mars, and of course, one day, even invading the moon, no doubt. Also, SpaceLink, in which I believe is a sub-brand of SpaceX, is a bunch of satellites in orbit providing, well, satellite-based internet. Like I say, personally, I don't agree with some of Elon's business choices, but I do believe he is onto something, and his corporations will definitely be leading the way into our tech-obsessed future. Now, will the general public rebel against some of these corporations, trying to revolutionise our way of life, with voice-activated tech in our homes, collecting data, to self-driving cars that pedestrians won't trust? Only time will tell. But I know one thing, CDPR accidentally predicted the future of corporations taking over. Like I aforementioned, when I first entered Night City, I was very surprised by how well grounded the city and its way of life was. Even though Night City clearly does look futuristic, with every corner you turn it feels like you're in Piccadilly Circus. But everything from the footpaths to the road networks are no different from the cities we see today. The addition I did see is the walk/don't walk signs on the pedestrian crossings. The signs are actually shown on the road via a massive LEDs or a hologram. Something like this I could easily see being implemented in the future. I also noticed the lack of driverless cars, which again I know I mentioned earlier, but I think people will push against this tech, and obviously this seems to be the case in Night City. However, there is a self-delivery service of your car, but it seems to be only V that has this ability. There is also a luxury autonomous taxi service, but obviously not everyone can afford this. As for the architecture, it's not much different from today, except we don't have buildings that bridge across from one another. And as for the many blocks of flats in the game, they are definitely something out of Judge Dredd. I don't think we could build anything as depressing as those. I also noticed that Night City is a free city, basically its own state. Could something like this happen eventually? Maybe. When the UK voted to leave the European Union in 2016, there were calls for the City of London to remain in the Union, which would have meant it would have had to separate from the United Kingdom as well as England. I still don't think the outcry has died down. So yes, I probably could see independent cities, such as Night City, in the future. Talking of Night City, it's a buzz, same as any other city, with plenty for the residents to get up to. Bars, restaurants, cafes, markets, the list goes on. Of course, alcohol is still a very popular way to let your hair down in Night City. I don't think that will ever change. Talking of food and drink though, the edible foods and drinks in Night City aren't too different to what we're consuming now. Coffee, tea, soft drinks are all still a thing. Snacks, vegetables still exist. The big change I did notice is the mass production of synthetic meats down in the far south of the city. Again, with the ever-growing panic to cut emissions here in Western Europe, governments and activists are pleading with consumers, farmers and scientists to cut meat production and look into alternatives. Plant-based meats have been around for a long time now and have been developing and getting better year on year now. So definitely at some point in the future I could easily see the mass production of synthetic meats. The latest buzz in Night City seems to be a pastime called brain dances. Now I'm going to try and give a detailed explanation on how these work, but I struggle to understand it fully myself, so some of it is going to be me improvising. So as of right now, in 2021, VR headsets are still a thing, but don't seem to be as popular as they once were, now only catering to a niche market. The issue mostly is the lack of games, interactivity and some users suffering with motion sickness. A brain dance is essentially a VR experience, requiring a headset, but the experience is literally first person, reliving a memory or a dream for example. The experience are normally short recorded clips referred to as virtues, which are recorded by individuals via their cyber optics. Then it is edited, sold and consumed by BD headset users. Some are pretty explicit and sold on the black market. For example, some users like to experience the sensation of death to adult-themed activities. As of 2021, VR headsets are getting more advanced and fixing the issue of motion sickness. Once more people take the plunge and dive into VR, I could easily see them being something quite similar to the BDs used in Cyberpunk. I mean, people are already using their VR headsets for, shall I say, personal use. Something I did find strange when observing the residents of Night City is the lack of either mobile phone use or ownership. It's very rare to see a resident with a mobile device. Maybe most residents use the holo communication via their cyberware/optics like V. This is something I can't really see changing in our society. Mobile devices are certainly here to stay. Another interesting observation is the continued use of cigarettes. Now of course tobacco has been smoked for centuries, but obviously in recent years there has been a surge in the use of vaping equipment. I expected to see some of Night City's residents to be using a lot of vape technology. I think our society will mostly stay the same going forward regarding cigarettes and vapes. People would choose one or the other. Another thing I really loved about Night City is its street language, or hip young talk. Whatever that means. I mean, as most of you know, there are always new words appearing on the internet these days, and randomly being thrown around on the street. Half I don't understand. I mean, what the hell is a simp? Anyway, I digress. Night City street talk is basic but understandable, and I actually liked it as they're actually something different. Although the word biz is thrown around way too much. It's short for business. Who would have thought? Anyway, here's some of the words and their meanings. Again, some of these may mean something else, but this is how I interpreted them. I like CD Projekt's approach to these street words. Nice and simple, and again, I think new random words with meanings will always appear into our society, especially with the power of the internet. Good attention to detail, CDPR. When I was wandering the streets of Night City, most of the people I was passing were slumped over or holding their arms. I did wonder if there were perhaps some issue of narcotics in the city, or could it be people recovering from having fresh cyber implants fitted? Unfortunately, I came across lots of poverty and homelessness in the city too, which I hope is something we really don't see in our future. So in conclusion, without trying to repeat myself, I feel CD Projekt's vision of 2077 is certainly an accurate one. From corporations growing and branching out, offering products to cater for everyone's needs for mega profits, cyberware actually being feasible, cars possibly being converted over to hydrogen rather than fossil fuels, and VR experiences becoming fully fledged experiences. Would I want to live in Night City, or a city that has adapted to its way of life? Yes and no. I certainly love to try out some of the cars that Night City offers, and the cyberware, mostly the cyber optics, and to admire the architecture. As for everything else, I think I'll pass. So what do you think? Is Cyberpunk 2077 a glimpse into our future? Or have I looked into it too much? I suppose all we have to do is wait 56 years and find out.